Welcome to Charter Local Edition Northwest. I'm Dana Cowley, your host, and we're broadcasting inside the historic Marcus Whitman Hotel. My guest today is Washington State Senator Mike Hewitt. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for the opportunity.
You've been working for a long time in the legislature, and you've been impacted by initiatives. Give me your opinion about that.
Well, yeah, not me in particular, but the budget as a whole. The very first year that I was elected or was sworn into office was 2001. And in the year 2000, there were two initiatives on the ballot passed by the people in the state that were of 728 and 732, and their titles were, do teachers need more money? Do they need a COLA? And the other one was 728, which is, should we have a smaller class size? And no one could disagree with the policy. I mean, it makes sense, but it required $800 million of brand new money out of the budget someplace. And so over the 15 years that I've been in the legislature, we've had several of those initiatives that have come back to the legislature, and they don't identify where the money comes from or is supposed to come from. They just literally say, you legislators go find $2 billion, which is the last one 2 years ago, 1351, another small class size. They just say, you find the $2 billion. We don't care where it comes from. And so if you're in bad times, and we've had two of those times in the last 15 years, 2001 and 2008, where we were in large deficits, something has to be cut in those cases, and so you have to, which is not all bad. I mean, you have to prioritize where your money comes from, but they have a huge impact on the budget itself. And so, and let me also say that I'm a supporter of the initiative process. I would never vote to get rid of the initiative process, but I think if you're going to pass an initiative, you should identify where the money is going to come from, so that it doesn't take away from other programs that are already existent in the budget. So it has a huge impact, and over the years I've supported bills that said if you have an initiative on the ballot that is going to take a significant amount of money out of the budget, you have to identify where that money is going to come from. You know, and to go back to 2001, those two budgets that those two initiatives that passed in the year 2000. 728 and 732, the people put on the ballot again in 2005 or 2004, I lose track of time, but there was a proposal to raise the state sales tax by a penny, just a 1 cent penny.
I remember that.
Yeah, to fund those two initiatives. And it failed, yes, by as much as those two initiatives passed, which was significant. I think both of them were in the larger 68 percentile, 67, 68%, and this penny initiative failed by the same amount. And so, you know, the voters want something, but when they have to identify where the money comes from, they're a little more reluctant. So I just think that we should pass a bill, and I've signed on to some bills that identifies where the money is going to come from if you're going to pass those initiatives.
Yes, I think that's a very good idea to allow more involvement and deeper thinking on behalf of our voters. And our voters, all the years I've been in news in Washington State, almost 30 years, the message pretty consistently has been clear that voters like to have control and are not big fans of increases. So that's...
Well, the initiative process is there so that if the legislature doesn't do what the people wish them to do, that's an outlet for them to take. And so I fully support that. But it is causing us a lot of grief in the legislature.
How else are the balance of powers affecting what you're trying to do in the legislative session now?
Yeah, I think you're talking about the McCleary case, and just for a little bit of history for the viewers. 3 or 4 years ago, the legislature passed House Bill 2261, and it was a very, very complicated policy bill that involved K-12 education and how we should approach K-12 and how we should fund K-12. We anticipated it was about an $8 billion bill to fund that, and we didn't have $8 billion at the time to fund that bill. And the arguments,
usually don't.
No, well, we have. Actually, we've done that now in the last couple of years. I mean, we're almost where they want us to, but I'll get to that in a second. But I voted against the bill, not because of the policy that was inside the bill, but because we didn't have the money for it. And so a couple of years later, we were taken to court, and it's called the McCleary case.
Right.
And the Supreme Court justices basically said,
you shall do
you guys
this.
passed it, now you fund it. And there's the problem. You should never pass something you don't have the money for at the time. So that's where the McCleary case came from. But the separation of power that I'm adamantly against is that they have told and held rein on this court case, and they've given us until 2018 to totally fund this. But now they've said, you haven't made enough progress, which we have, quite frankly. You haven't made enough progress towards this, so we're going to hold you in contempt of court.
Yes.
And so they're now fining the legislature $100,000 per day, which is not so much a big deal because it goes into a pot that's going to go to education anyway. And so, you know, it's kind of a, I don't know, it's kind of just a move on their part, and I think they're just being overly active as a court. And I don't think that they don't have the ability to have the purse strings.
Well, it does escalate the issue, and it does push it into the forefront of the media.
I don't disagree with that at all. And I'm not going to argue the case whether it was right or whether it's wrong, but for them to say, here's how much you have to spend and here's how you have to do it, and that's kind of what they're doing to us right now. And if you look at the state constitution, they don't have the power to do that. So I think that's a stepping out of bounds on their part. And then just more recently is the charter school initiative that passed on the ballot last year.
What's your thought about that?
Well, I'm for charter schools, and I voted for charter schools a couple of times in the legislature. We actually got it through, and the governor signed it in 2003, but it was overturned in court. And I'm not going to argue whether they're right or whether they're wrong on this issue, but how they did it was just absolutely off the wall. They announced on a Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock that this was going to be unconstitutional after the charter schools have already been set up, and 1,200 students in this state are already in charter schools. They just said, you're going to have to disband.
It does seem a little late in the day.
It's way late in the day, and they've had a couple of years to argue this case and look at it, and so I just think that they're being overly active as a court. So I think the legislature kind of needs to rein them in a little bit and take a little bit of their power back.
Well, that's just what I was going to ask. Are you and other lawmakers planning to take any action?
I actually signed a letter that our caucus drafted about a month ago. 19 out of the caucus signed it and sent it to the courts to tell them that they're a little bit overly active. And so I haven't heard much about it in the press, but we're trying to make a statement to them that we think they've overreached their bounds and they should step back a little bit. I signed on to a bill last year sponsored by Senator Padden out of Spokane, and he was a district justice, that said that the Supreme Court justices have to be elected from districts across the state, which would mean that, you know, southeastern Washington would get a judge, northeastern Washington would get a judge, and so we would identify the nine districts across the state, and there would be a judge from each one of those, and I think we'd get more balance on the courts. Right now we have a very liberal court. They can be elected as a whole and at large, and so you get what you get, and people really don't follow Supreme Court justices.
No, and it's not a topic that people tend to vote on either.
Well, they don't have any, there's no ability to find out how the judges vote and what they do. And I can tell you every 2 years when the election process rolls around, I get a significant amount of calls from my constituents wanting to know, you know, from our standpoint more conservatively, who they should vote for. Because they just don't know. They haven't had the opportunity to find out how they vote and what their philosophies are.
Yes, I know in elections that people will very often vote for a few key candidates, a few key issues, but many other positions, particularly judges, they're just left unmarked.
Yeah, they are.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Mike Hewitt,
Thank
a pleasure for you to be here
Yeah.
and talk with us, and we thank you for watching. I'm Dana Cowley, and this is Charter Local Edition Northwest.